Aloha mai kako e kalahui e. Welcome today to a very exciting discussion for me because I have known these women for years now, some since they were little girls and now they're, you know, full grown mommies and women and others, you know, on here who I've known throughout my time in my own learning about what our subject area is today, right? Today, on behalf of the organizers of La Hoʻihoʻi Ea Honolulu, we'd like to bring forward the topic of remembering Haumea, right? And remembering, the reason why I like remembering is remembering not only looking to our own memories, our ancestral memory inside of us, but also remembering, like actually helping our wahine put our bodies back together again, right? At some point in our history, our bodies, as men and women, right, as Kanaka, our bodies were dismembered, right? Parts of it was pulled apart. And now as we regain our own Mauli and our own ea, right, part of it is actually physically putting back our bodies together, right, as a lahui, right, and having these really tough sometimes and very interesting discussions about what we have gone through, right, and what we are presently experiencing and our hopes for the future, right? So our topic today is remembering Haumea, Hoʻihoʻi ke ea o ka Mauli wahine, right? The cycles and evolutions of us. Now, we will not be able to tackle the entirety of Wahinedom, right? Of the world of the Wahine in 1 hour today, right? But what we hope to accomplish today is to start a discussion that many of us have been having in smaller circles, and thanks to, you know, initiatives like what happened in 2012 with Ahavahine, and also what has happened before and after that, where women have come together to train themselves and also the next generation of Wahine Hawaii in our cycles and our evolutions, and learning from each other, learning from our ike kūpuna about what it is that makes us, right, healthy, well, and thriving, right, as wahine. And more importantly, how that impacts and how that's affected by, right, our ohana and the men in our lives, right? So this topic for La Hoʻihoʻi Ea is I think it's a first, but loving everything that's happening with La Hoʻihoʻi Ea 2021, right? So there's been a bunch of events that have already happened, and today on to next weekend, right, until July 31st, which is the actual day of La Hoʻihoʻi Ea and the day that we celebrate this national holiday. There'll be more talks, more events. There's a film festival, there's music. We just had a Nahua Ea, you know, last week, you know, and so there's a whole bunch of things that are happening for La Hoʻihoʻi Ea that you and your families, your halau, your communities can gain so much insight into the Mauli world and into, oh yeah, Mauli world, yeah, I wish we had that now. Just sorry, side note, right? Like, as we're doing this on social media, yeah, Ikaika, you gotta bring back Mauli world. But if you want more information about La Hoʻihoʻi Ea, please go to lahoʻihoʻiea.org online, and also join there and like their Facebook page, yeah, La Hoʻihoʻi Ea Honolulu. And the reason why I think we have Honolulu on there is because, you know, this national holiday is now being celebrated across the Pai'aina, right? From our ohana on Kauai all the way to Hawaii Island, right? There's events that go on within the communities, right, that celebrate this time and more so the principle of Hoʻihoʻi Ea, yeah? Okay, so Mihana, stop talking already, yeah? Get into introducing these mana wahine right here, these beautiful women that we have as guests today here. And I'm gonna bring them on one by one and have them, introduce themselves and yeah, basically introduce themselves to all of you. Most of them are super well known in their, you know, in their communities, or you might know aspects of them in their community. And hopefully today you will learn more into the insight, into the passion of the kind of work that they've been doing. And work meaning not the kind of work that you know, go and punch in your time card for, but the work that is so important that happens within our ohana, right? Yeah, so without further ado, Kako, that's me. I'm gonna take it in the Brady Bunch order that I see you guys on top of my screen. Yeah, so we'll go up. First up is Cami Kanoa-Wong. Aloha mai, Cami.
Aloha mai kako, o Cami Kanoa-Wong ko uinoa noho wau ma waima nalo ai no ho'opulapula. Aloha, my name is Cami, and I currently live in Waimanalo, Homestead, and I'm from Manoa, Oahu. I think I'm super stoked and honored to be here with these other wahine. And my focus, since after adolescence, I've been really interested in like birth. And then I've always, Papa Hanamoku's always been my jam. I've always loved to learn about her from high school time. And then I think when I learned about like actual birthing and actually where I can have a independent in how I birth and how birth is a form of independence of ku'oko'a, I just kind of immersed myself in, you know, the birth movement, the home birth movement as a way of, you know, claiming ieve and everything that goes along with birth. I've been very into, and then kind of pairing that with noi'i into Haumea and Papahana Moku and all my favorite awesome akua avaiva, all the awesome akua wahine. And yeah, that's kind of my kahua. I'm a kamanaka ho'olave, kanaloa moku. And I love that my favorite line in the Kumulipo is line 1746 that says, O Haumea nohoia kanaloa kua. And I think that's kind of my two favorite akua together, and that kind of birthed me in a way. I raised on Koho'olave, but I've always been into like the feminine side of that and how we as Kanaka Wahine are Haumea as we birth our children, raise our children, and all that stuff. So oia no, mahalo nui.
Mahalo, Cami. Okay, then we'll go now to Makana Kane Kuahiwinui. Aloha, Makana.
Ai, aloha mai kako, mai ka pina kalai hae ai ke ku ana mai o kala maluna nei o ahu alua ka onohi o na kai e walu ai kanako o kapu kalai ka mole olu o le hua. Aloha, aloha mai kako o au o Makana Kane Kuahiwinui. He keiki papa na keia aina nani kamaha o no o Hawaii. Noho au ma alia pa'akai ma o ahu nei. My name is Makana Kane Kuahiwinui, and I'm so honored and still have chicken skin that I am in the Brady Bunch circle of all these amazing wahine that I've always looked up to from the very beginning of my coming to Haumea-ness, of my understanding of papa-ness. And as I reflect on our title, I really think about that remembering, as Auntie Mehana, or as Mehana said, as we're not only are we remembering, like intellectually recollecting what our kūpuna and how our kūpuna navigated through wahine-ness, but we're also bringing our Mauli together. We're bringing the Mauli as in the spiritual and the essence of wahine, the physical and the body of wahine, but also the mind and the intellect. We're bringing all of these things together. We're remembering, we're recollecting, we're thinking back to stories and mo'olelo and pule. And every time we come together in these conversations, every time we chime in or we write a note down, we're remembering our ea. And as Cami mentioned earlier, we also are remembering our ku'oko'a in all of these things. So just some background, I started to question a lot of the ways that society had looked at wahine and had spoken about wahine. This was when I was in college. And a lot of the things that I heard were dirty and not allowed to do this and not allowed to do that and all these other things. And Just some personal backstory. I was raised by Wahine. I had 3 moms, if you know my background, and I had all those moms had aunties and sisters and girl cousins. I didn't have a lot of men growing up because I didn't have very many uncles. I just had like girl cousins, girl aunties. I had multiple mothers. So that idea of Wahine not being enough was just, I couldn't understand it. So I took it another level and I turned it into an academic argument, which was one of the steps that I needed to do in order to get to the good work of spreading the message, learning from other wahine, being able to regurgitate that to kaikomahine. And I'm personally not a mother myself, but I feel that every time I have the opportunity to kami'ilio, to bala'au, to kuka with some kaikomahine or keiki kane, I become a part of their journey into their wholeness, into their mauli. So mahalo again for having me.
Mahalo, Makana. Yeah, and now see Kihapai, now you're the OG of the group. Yeah, next to Auntie Mehana over here. Oh, and I forgot, right? I just automatically assume always that people, would recognize me. So ho'okano. But Oano ho'io Mehanaokala Hind, e kala mai no palolo o Haumea aka no wau ma'alia manu I ke ia manawa maka au o Makana ma alia pa'akai and ha'oli loa wau ke ike aku I ke ia wahine and ha'oli loa wau I ke ia hui ana mamua o ka la hui. Yeah, so mahalo nui, everyone. Yeah, but now, Kihapai Krug. Aloha Kihapai pea oi.
Aloha kako, ikai mahalo. O wau no o Kihapai no waiau maiau. Noho wau mamu ana lua I kia manawa. Mauka iki o mehana lawa o Makana. So I'm currently a Kumu at Ke Kula Kaiapunio Anuenue at the Kula Ki'eki'e at high school. I mahalo for Mehana for asking me to be here. I'm still trying to figure out what I am doing here. No, I would say my role here today is as a makuahine, raising 3 keiki who are pretty much makua now. But just how as a makuahine, along with their makua kane, how we raised them and how we incorporated, I guess, our Mauli Hawaii into our ohana. So mahalo.
Yeah, and Kihapai is super shy, and will never admit to kind of claiming the space that I see her in, which is, just one of those women who, in fact, the first that I know of. There may be others, throughout the Pai'aina who actually put kind of what it is that we were talking about into action. Yeah, and that's so important nowadays. That's such a next, that's like leveling up when it comes to, reclaiming our ea, right, is actually performing the practices which these 3 women here on this screen have done that, right? And that's that space that they're in, right, is not always a comfortable space. It's a space that not everyone even around them understands, right? So they face criticism, right? They face just confusion, right, by other people, basically on like, what are you talking about? And then more important, why are you talking about that? Or why are you doing this, right? Get one hospital, why aren't you going there? Get, why these ceremonies, and why do you do that? What are you talking about? You're talking about your period, what are you talking about? Like, why? So these 3 women have actually, not for the sake of anything else other than their ohana and to support their their ohana and their own Mauli ola too, to bring forward and step into that brave space, right? Step into that very, to me, very courageous space of actually, you know, doing those practices. So I thank you, Kihapai, for that, you know, and she'll always be in denial that that's anything big. But I know as a makuahine, I don't have daughters, but I know that if I did, I would have followed that lead, right? I would have, you know, been able to be like, oh yeah, no, we can, you know, I can do that, you know, now, and it will affect the Mauliola of my children. So thank you so much, Kihapai, for that. Kihapai, I wanted to ask you, because the other two women touched on it a little bit, but what does this the title of our program, yeah, that Remembering Haumea, and that Hoʻihoʻi Kea o ka Mauli Wahine, does that touch on anything for you about something that you'd like to kind of talk about?
I think, you know, through conversations that we've had before, you know, it's about honoring, of course, for me, my keiki, my kaikamahine, you know, in this context, but also honoring the wahine in our ohana, the wahine that came before us. You know, of course, we're pointing to Haumea, you know, as the kahua, but, you know, it's all of the wahine who came after her and who will be coming after us. So definitely looking at this, you know, to ho'ohanohano our wahine in our ohana, and I think just encouraging other ohana to do the same, however you do it. You know, it's not necessarily doing it in a specific way, but just to remember who we are, looking back at what we are, what we were, what we are, what we will continue to be.
You know, that was my
I hope that
yeah. No. Mahalo for bringing it up, because you talked about two things that are super important. One, the recognition of the wahine around us, right? We've always seen, right? Haumea nui a iwa iwa, right? Haumea kino mano, right? Like all those references reference the Haumea in all of us, but to be able, there was a time period, I would argue, that we've forgotten that kind of kinship that we all have, right? Or that kind of relationship that we all have, right? But to recognize the Haumea in us, right, is to recognize, we would have to then, right, see the Haumeas that have come before us, the Haumeas that still stand amongst us, right? And then nurture the Haumea that are coming up, right? Because that is Haumea, right? That collectiveness of us is Haumea, right? And then that second part about how it is that the ohana is brought into that kind of understanding. I think my next question that I want to ask, right, is Cami, can you kind of expand a little bit on how you know, those birth practices, right, that you talk about, right? And again, there'll be people out here that are listening to this conversation that still yet have no clue what that means, right? What it is that is being reclaimed, you know, in this va. Even though many of our friends have chosen, you know, home births and have over the years evolved that sense of home birth, right? From just like a home birth that's done amongst many communities and cultures and so forth, to home births that now have la'olapa'au that, you know, take them from beginning to after, you know, and then even how that transmits into the child, you know, that's born. But can you just talk about some of the things that you want to bring out, that you want people to know out there about how that is reclaiming that and through those birth practices?
Hey, mahalo. When I was hapai with my first keiki, I went down to the Bishop Museum and I started to do noi'i. I've always loved ceremony, appreciated ceremony, participating in makahiki ceremony since the early 2000s on Koho'olave and other parts of the Pai'aina. But I felt that there was ceremony as a part of this whole birth va, but I wasn't sure what that was. And I had heard about ieve, you know, the practice of kanu ieve, and I wanted to learn more about that. And I also want to acknowledge that the Krugs And the nahale'as, you know, really helped to fight. This is before I even had my first hiapo. And I think that was also impactful into kind of like, okay, what is this? And what do I need to do? Because this needs to, you know, I'm not going to waste this this organ that I created. And how do I honor my kūpuna and also the Mauli of my keiki that I'm going to hana, right? How do I honor that? So one of the things that I did was I went to the Bishop Museum and I started researching, and I heard, I listened to Lipine Manaleo, and this is, my olalo was very, very rudimentary at the time, but I did what I could. I wrote what I could pick up, and I knew that this is something that I wanted to do. Now for me, when I heard about there was an option that I could birth at home, and at the time it's predominantly white people that I knew that were doing it, right? But I heard that it was an option. And to me, that just totally resonated in my na'au, that that's what I'm gonna do. And so I looked for midwives. There's no Hawaiian midwives at the time that I could find on Oahu. And I found a couple of midwives that were willing to help me. But as I had my first keiki at home, you know, I had my mother talking to all the Native Hawaiian you know, every party we went to, my mom would introduce me to another Native Hawaiian doctor because this is her realm, right? Like, oh, talk to my daughter. She's trying to, you know, give birth at home. And I was like, oh, you know, I appreciate the haukapila. It's awesome, but that's not my mo'olalo. I'm young and I'm healthy, and I know that I'm gonna hanau at home. And to me, just like you said, just to push past that uncomfortable, just to, you know, do it, go through it, have my keiki at home, and then to be able to tell the mo'olalo. I'm happy to have been able to inspire many births around me, where many wahine Hawaii, if they're able to, and if they choose to, have birthed at home, you know, with kako, like, yeah, you can do it too. It's awesome. But I think the most important part of that, being ku'oko'a, is that we have the choice, right? We brought, you know, Queen Emma and King Kamehameha, they built a beautiful hospital. Queen Kapi'olani, they have a beautiful hospital if we need it. But my sense of being of ku'oko'a is that I can choose that I don't need it. You know, I can birth at home. This is my air. When I birthed my first keiki, my husband was chanting. Maybe I wasn't too into it at the moment, but that was a sense of bringing who we are as Hawaii into that birth room, right? We had my mother there, my grandmother who flew all the way from Pi'ihonua. She was in the garage upstairs, my auntie from my dad's side. You know, just having the ohana around, the wahine ohana around was so important, even though they weren't right in my face, you know. And I know that, actually I don't know, but I've seen hospital situations where they're around. But to me, just to feel that support really close, I think was all the difference, all that I wanted. And so, sorry, wahine kind things. And I'm so stoked that I made that choice, and I've been able to not ha'iola, but just talk one-on-one. You know, when people pass my number to people and I just talk to them about, like, hey, you have all these options, you can do it. Hey, did you know about, the people ask me like, oh, what is this everything? And I'm like, okay, well, this is, you know, I read that some people in Ni'ihau or Kauai, they just canoe it in the pathway of their hale, or under the stoop in their hale, so that when they go holo holo, they know how to get back home, you know. Or other different traditions of canoeing their iave for, like, you know, if you're from Kalapana, you did niu, and if you're from Puna, of course you did hala, right? And just perpetuating those mo'olelo, or like, what does this mean to you? So I've had friends that have done lychee or manako or whatever that is, or a beautiful flower so they can make lei. So, right, we modernize these ancient traditions. I know we don't live in the 1800s, we don't live in the 1700s. So how do we take the ike that we've been able to noi and hear mo'olelos from our ohana and make it contemporary, modernize that? Yeah, this is how we live as Kanaka Hawaii today.
You know what? I want to go off on that, because one of the things that does happen is anytime we talk about these things, right, people automatically assume we want to regress, right? That there's some element of us that is trying to claim a romanticized past, right? But that's not true. That's not what we're doing here. We and I want to hear from you what you think it is, because what I think it is that in reclaiming these practices that we've seen, we know, have worked for the Maliola of our ohana, we are not regressing, but we're trying to, like ho'oponopono almost, what what society has thrown us off track on, right? Like we had a clear path towards, you know, Mauliola that that we set ourselves up, right? And whether it was the chanting that's so important that happens during, you know, the birth process and the creation of that and the carry on, or the practice of Malama de Ieve after, or the fact that there's all these women around, we understood, right, through experience and research, right, and both, right, that we have evidence that that was healthy for our ohana, right? That was a healthy option even today for our ohana, right? And you guys are now all taking data, right, on all your folks' experience coming in. But people would love to keep pushing us back as if it's like, oh, you're trying to live in the past. And we say, no, this is the path to well-being for the future, right? Like, this is what's needed, you know, or is it? Am I making that up, you know, in my head? Is this something that you feel that sets us up as a people, right? These practices, not just hana o makahale, but also the ceremonies around Waimakalehua, right? And these concepts that we then put into action in our ohana. How necessary are they in your mind?
Oh, absolutely necessary. I think that we look at we always say, you know, nanai kawama mua, but we look at the past as a source of inspiration or to understand who we are. Like, I feel like I was definitely disconnected from being Hawaiian in all kinds of realms growing up. And that was just, it was what it was, right? But as we learn about what our kūpuna did only a couple generations ago, you know, I understand myself better. I understand why my na'au tells me certain things. And I take that information and be like, okay, but practically we can do this, this, and this makes sense to us as an ohana. And that's how we strive to just be the best in the future. And we're not trying to live in the past because we cannot, you know, we are on Zoom right now, you know, we're not talking in a little hale somewhere, although I'd love to do that too, but we straddle both worlds, you know, and that's so important. And I think, and I'd love to hear from, you know, Kihapai and you too, but as we raise our keikis, it's been important to me to raise them with the kahua of who we are as Kanaka. We're Hawaii first, you know, we get plenty other kind of ethnicities, but we're Hawaii first. And then how do we, you know, bring that and be modern Kanaka too? Like one of my friends would always say, like, yeah, we go work lo'i all day, but we go home play PlayStation because that feels good, you know. And just how so I'm all about like raising our keiki like that. Okay, Ma'ala.
Yeah, no, my ka'i. No, you can hold on more. But Kihapai or Makana, what do you guys think? Is it the things that the practices that you guys have perpetuated and some created, right, in this day and time, for lack of a better term, right? Because I say created, not created out of like just boom, out of thin air, right? Created out of from a kahua, right, of ike and being careful and cautious and, you know, not wanting to put your families in harm's way at all, right? But how necessary are these practices for you today? Either of you.
I'll go, and then I have a question for Kihapai later. So in reclaiming my own body and the way that society will label me because I menstruate or because I have these cycles, in reclaiming that and looking to our kūpuna as examples, I've realized that our menstrual blood, our vale, and my favorite line of the Kumulipo is the sixth line of the Kumulipo, vale ho'okumu honua ia. Our vale, all of our mucus, our menstrual blood, our amniotic fluid, our tears, men's semen, all of those mucousy things created the entire universe from the Kumulipo perspective, from our perspective. And learning that Waimakalehua and Vale were kanu, were planted, were buried. And when we say kanu, we mean like plant into the ground so that something can grow from it. And our Vale was taken care of the same way that our Ieve And just for everyone out there, ieve is placenta, and another word for ieve is honua. And honua means earth. Honua means that which provides. So menstrual blood and placenta were ceremoniously taken care of exactly the same. They were planted, they were kanu into the earth. So taking that as a foundation, taking that ike, taking that intellect from kūpuna and bringing it into modern day practices in what I do was a way for me to reclaim my body, was a way to reclaim my fluids, my vale for something that has a purpose. And specifically, every time I plant my vale into the earth, that is me resubscribing to Haumea. That's me resubscribing to Papa as I literally put it into the ground. I like dig up a little bit of earth, put it down into the ground. But without calling it out or anything, Kihapai actually had a huge role in me understanding that. So just some backstory. Kihapai and what she created for her two girls changed the entire trajectory of my academic research, and that was just what I needed to do to like have ground in like the college sense. But since then, I've been able to talk to so many, not only kaikomahine, but also makua, to parents who need to like unlearn all of these negative stories that they've been told about themselves. But I just kind of want to highlight what the ceremonies that Kihapai created. And if, however comfortable you are, Kihapai, can you just tell us a little bit about how you and your ohana came to, it's not haku, but it's kind of haku from a base of kūpuna. How did you guys come to that? And in addition, what was the push to just do it?
Oh, wow. Okay. I think really from the beginning, of course, having being a makua, but their makua kane, he was a leader for our ohana. He led us to look at our traditional ways, so from, of course, starting with the ieve, we had our own things that we did. I think everybody knows that with our youngest one, we did have a bit of struggle, but it all turned out how it was supposed to, and everything turned out well. But I would say it started probably, starting from there, because really when I was pregnant and gave birth, I gave birth in the hospital, C-section, so I wasn't as far along as how Cami, was able to hano at home. But, we did what we could with our ieve, and so starting from there, and then, with kaikomahine, two kaikomahine and a keiki kane, I think we saw that, for keiki kane, ka'imua was kind of a more known type of ceremony, that was talked about. And it was kind of like, okay, if the keiki kane had something, us as wahine or kaikomahine who, are born to hanao, and, we have all of this, we're a couple, there has to be something that our kaikomahine have to go through when they become wahine, because the kane had something when he became a kane, right? The keiki kane becoming a kane. So I would say, through amongst everything else, our girls, were raised with the intention that when they become wahine, there will be an aha, and it wasn't just, there were different things. I know I don't really talk about it. I mean, Makana. Mehana was there for the two. Makana was probably the first person that we had really talked about in detail about what we did for their aha. And in small groups, I will share some things with people. But for the most part, one of the key things was definitely, we will have an aha. Of course, for me as a makuahine, it fell on me. That was a lot of kuleana that I had. And I was really nervous about it. I'm still nervous as a makua. But, you know, so for me, it was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? What, you know, and of course you can't time when it's gonna happen, right? It just happens when it happens. So it's not like you could do all this planning. I mean, you can to a sense, but really you don't know when it's gonna happen. So you kind of want to do the best you can to prepare for that time. But you know, in raising the girls, they knew that okay, when that time came, they would have the aha. For us, that's when we had cut their hair. Yeah, so their hair was, you know, long the whole time until at the aha, we would cut their hair, they would get their ears pierced. So those were some things that signified that time of them becoming wahine, you know, physically. And also they would get their first uhi to mark their alamai. Yeah. So those were probably the key physical components that we had in mind set for that. You know, at that time, or even during research, I could hardly find anything. So it was really, okay, what do we think our kūpuna may have done? You know, really, and into a sense, kind of, we did haku, you know, we did create it, but with the intention of it being a kahua from the past, yeah, that we were trying to pull in what we knew from the past into that time. And I think I shared earlier amongst us that it was a ceremony to honor our kaikamahine, but it wasn't just about them. It was about the wahine that we invited to be there. And it was their role as wahine in the lives of our kaikamahine, well, you know, turning into wahine. And it was honoring them there. And like I said, you know, the ones that came before us and the ones coming after us. So the whole ceremony was pretty much about honoring the wahine around us, yeah, in our lives. And the responsibility that my kaikamahine had, and now as a wahine, their responsibility to those wahine sitting in front of them, you know, that they could say and talk right straight to, this is my kuleana, this is my promise to you as other wahine, that as a wahine, I am going to be this. And the Kane had a role in it too, because once, you know, we did our aha and we kind of closed that portion of the wahine aha, then the Kane came in, because that's when they had their kuleana, you know, to perform the kakao side. Yeah, yeah, and as far as so even preparing food, that's where the Kane, they took on the preparation of the food, the mea'ai for the aha. I don't know anything else. I'm you know, even now it's you know, I mean, my they're makua now, right? My kids here, so I feel like I'm going back. Okay, wait, what was, you know? And at that time, I guess I really wasn't thinking that how significant it was gonna be. But I see now, it helped to shape them, because I see them as makua now, and it helped to shape them. So it was definitely important having that aha for our kaikamahine. But it wasn't just about them, you know. So yes, we celebrated them, but it wasn't just about them.
You know, the two of you, both Cami and Kihapai, what you brought into what both of you guys had mentioned was this idea of having this group around you, right, and around that, right. So it's almost like an introduction, right, like how we do when we uniki as kumuhula. We get we get brought before the hula world, right? And that hula world then is we're connected. We, you know, our kumu makes sure that we're connected now to all these people that have been invited, right? And same thing around the birthing process, right? You bring the people around that now bond, right? And then now have a, you know, not only a responsibility to you as the wahine, right? But you make these other people a part of that it's not a milestone, but that life moment, right? So that now they will forever have the memory and the relationship and the kuleana, right, from birth or from the time that, you know, this kaikamihine becomes a wahine. You know, there's now a reciprocity that happens, right? An active kind of engagement that happens, you know, along the way. And that's how that's been important and something that's been kept, right? Even though the specifics of exactly what kūpuna did at this point in the birthing or at this point during the, you know, aha makalehua, you know, or during the aha, right, will differ amongst families, right? Some of the tenets that remain are that there's a unit brought around, right? The event, right? There's almost like a largening, if you will, of the ohana to take responsibility, right? Or it could be just within your ohana, but to now interact, you know, with this child, right? And with this opio. Yeah, so that, you know, mahalo for you guys for mentioning that, and then Makana for also, you know, asking the questions, because I think what you touched on, right, are not the details of the, you know, the moment by moment kinds of things, right, which is important not to mention, you know, at this point, because what you guys have also made significant, you know, that has to happen is that there needs to be room. There needs to be room in the cultural practice for the ohana to then assert its noina, right? It's the things Makana had mentioned earlier, right? There are things that exist within our families, right? For the Krug ohana, definitely uhi, right? And kakao is one of them. Mo'oku oho is another thing that's important in that ohana, right? And the recitation of that and the hakumele, you know, aspect of it, right? And Makana, you're talking about that every one of our families has something that we can hone in on, right, to help build our kahua, right, and help build out our practice, right, so that it doesn't all look the same, right? So that Kihapai is not going to go publish step by step, this is how you do, you know, and aha, you know, because, you know, in truth, she can speak about it, right? And Cami can speak about the home birthing process, you know, and actually both of them could lay out, right, you know, first step, second step, third steps. But what will be most important is to understand the kind of kahua from which they are coming from, right? So that each of us can investigate our own kahua and then go, oh, okay, so there's elements of bringing important people to the ohana around. Okay, I got to make sure that I have that. Who those people are and why they are there, you know, for what role they have, will be up to each family, right? Important that, you know, both of you guys, you know, I love chanting. Chanting is my jam, right? That is an aspect, right, that is brought in, that somehow there is a recitation at some point in time during an aha that calls in, right, calls in the elements, you know, that need to be there, right? So, okay, need that, right? That's way more important
just add,
than time.
Yeah. So I want to add that was Mehana's role in our aha. She was, I am lucky to have her. And that was Mehana's role, part of her role, not her only role, but that was part of it. Mahalo for pointing to that. But yes, that was Mehana's role.
And mahalo for giving me a role, right? Mahalo, you know, in this day and time, right? It's so important for us to learn from each other and practice together, right? Because again, there'll be people in our lives that don't maybe understand or, you know, fully aware, you know, and then there'll be those others that, right, are full on game, right? Like, yes, let's do this together, right? So that's super important too. So mahalo for giving me kuleana. That's always a good thing in nowadays, yeah. But Makana, and you touched on practice too, right? About the practice you actually shared, you know, just a little while ago. Those kind of elements of what it is that you do, right? Expand it a bit on why that's so important, right? Taking those steps that you have taken to malama, right? Like you made the connection, like, no, this is honua, and it, you know, goes back into the honua. This is also part of that process, that papahana moku kind of process, that Haumea process, and this is why this goes back, you know, into the honua like this, because really one of the statements that you've made before when I've heard you speak, Makana, which like really shook me, was something so simple, right? You was like, yep, we can. And so boys, get ready, right? Boys who are listening to this, because this is when you guys start getting squeamish, right? Is, yeah, you know, we're going to use pads and tampons and stuff like that. And then it's going to end up in some landfill somewhere, right? And is that where, you know, is that what we want, right? And again, no judgment, right, for all you women who are out there right now. This is not a judgment panel here, right? We're not going to be like, oh, you still use pads, you know, like, okay, you know, you're heva, you know. No, we're not going to do that. Or, oh, you don't have your EFA, oh yeah, that's heva, you know. No judgment here, right? Don't misquote me either, right? But you know, one of the things that you said, and that shook me, because I never thought about it that way before, right? And for some of us who think that we are enlightened, right, and we are empowered to do that, I was just like, oh yeah, you know, you're right. You know, we're taught not even to put our hair and leave it all around, right? Because somebody might get it, or, you know, the rats might nibble at it, you know. So we malama that, but something so inherently part of our Mauliola, you know, we're willing to kind of, for years, right? For a period of possibly 40 years, right? Keep up the practice of just tossing it, you know, away. So Makana, what was that like for you in shifting that practice, you know, and or why is that significant? Or take the question wherever you want it to go, because I know I'm asking you like 100 questions all at one time.
No, you're not the only person, and I know exactly the moment you and I were on Mauna Kea, and I think verbatim I said, your waimakalehua is your mana. That's your mana. And you're not just gonna throw your mana away somewhere at Kahala Mall because it was convenient. So in learning that our menstrual blood is literally our mana, that is what has been gifted to us so that we may be blessed with keiki in the future to feed them and to nourish them and to move forward. So our waimakalehua is absolutely our mana, and it is our kuleana to take care of it. So from this moment on, you're going to be aware of where you dispose of that mana. If that is disposed into the trash or into a landfill, or, you know, wherever it may go, that is still an extension of your mana. And I have since chosen to kanuho that mana back into papa, because there are so many life-giving properties to those decaying parts of our body. And the third volume of Nanae Ke Kumu talks about it. I won't spoil it. Go ahead and read it. Just look into the back by Makalehua or menstruation, and you'll read the paragraph that I'm talking about. But it really, it was like a as soon as I learned that and I realized it, I thought, wow, that's so profound. And then I thought, oh, that's so basic. Like, that is such basic life. Same thing with our hair. We don't just dispose our hair any kind place. With our nails, we don't just dispose our nails any kind. Our teeth, or when our keiki lose their teeth, it doesn't just go any kind. We malama those things. Same with our piko, the small little crusty black parts after it just falls off. We malama those things. And it's the same mana that when we're talking about with our waimakalehua. And as I slowly began to understand or to put those practices in for myself, all these other things opened up. As far as, okay, so our kūpuna also had some sort of cleansing. There was a hi'uvai, or there was a kapukai at the end of our monthly cycle to let go of that kapu, because we are absolutely kapu while we're menstruating, because it's obvious our body is going through something, the way that we're thinking may be changing a little bit. You know, PMS is real, especially with our diets nowadays. We're not necessarily taking care of our diets because McDonald's is very easy, and I eat McDonald's often, so no judgment. But the things, going back to it, I understood that even the smallest thing is a bath, as a ritualistic bath with candles, with like essential oils. Hit up Cami for your favorite essential oils. Can transform our daily boring things into these rituals that have a lot of meaning. And so first it was like the kanu ikawe makalehua, just planting it. Then secondly, it was just reshifting how I'm thinking, reordering my words, as far as going from a deficient mindset, oh my God, this is sore, to a growth mindset as, wow, my body is capable of doing this, because my body is capable of doing what my makuahine and my kūpuna wahine and all the kūpuna wahine before me, to bring life, to sustain the goal, to sustain our lahui, to sustain our practices, our chants, our pule, and our language. And it's all because we have kuleana to one another. And I really like that we brought this all together, because it takes a village. Taking care of a newborn is not easy. They need to eat, sleep, defecate every 2 hours, and it takes a village. And same thing, in order to allow our kaikamahine to transition through the milestones from kaikamahine to wahine, there needs to be that same core group or additional wahine to keep everybody accountable. And then even when we transition into the halepe'a, into these monthly meetings, or these, however we want to explain it in English, when we menstruate together once a month, or however many times a year, we're resubscribing to that kinship. We're recollecting, we're coming, we're reuniting, so that we can keep tabs with each other. Same thing when we go into our professions, if that is a graduation from college, or if that is a graduation to become a kumuhula, there is another type of community kinship and recognition, so that we're all being accountable for, because nothing is random. Everything is organized in its natural ways. So mahalo for letting me share, and I can talk on and on about monthly rituals.
One of the things I think that you brought up, that you touched on a little bit, that I want to expand on, because I think we're all guilty of it at some point, but we're getting better at it, is, we've gotten so used to operating at a deficit, right? We've gotten so used to embracing the mythology that we can sleep when we die, right? That the lahui needs us, we got to keep working, we got to keep doing, we cannot take the time out, right? The respite that our body is pushing for, right? Our body is pushing for different things just naturally, the way it's cued, and we haven't gotten really good yet about creating that space and time that we need, right? That halepe'a. That's why I think the halepe'a was so important, right? And I'm like, really want a she shed, right? I want the halepe'a back. I want somewhere that has my own bathroom, my own room, right? That has enough room to invite the girls over into it. That just for that, I'm not going to say sanity, because I don't think it's insanity. I don't think that's a correct term. That the kind of chaos or maybe even the mundaneness of the outside world doesn't recognize that our couple needs space and time. Yeah, like we got to give, and we don't give ourselves that. Society will not give us that, right? We have to at some point reclaim that too. But that's something that we it's not normal, right? And we feel guilty about it. If we go to get a lomi, right, it's still, there's like a slight feeling, even though we know our body is healthier because of it, because that's just what people who have money and time do. We feel guilty that we're taking away that money and time from our ohana, right? We don't allow ourselves as women to be fully in that state of kapu because we've stuck in the society that keeps us moving, right? We always got to move. Don't take the 5 minutes. If you take the 5 minutes, you're taking it away from your family, from your job, so don't do it, right? Just keep moving, right? And I think that's one frontier when we start getting everything else figured out, that we really got to go and insist on, right? Somehow like insist on that time and space, for us, right? To do that. Or is it just me? I don't know.
No, I absolutely agree. Rest is so necessary for our Mauliola. It's so necessary for our well-being. And we saw this during COVID. The rest that we gave to the ocean, what had been repaid multiple times. The rest that we gave to the shores of Waikiki, the rest on the air, and how all of the rest is absolutely necessary. And partially it's just the way that society is organized. We're not living in kauhale as much as we could be, because when I need to go take a rest, I can rest assured that I have a kauhale to catch my back, because I'm going to do the same for the next wahine who needs to rest as well. So it's partially the organization of society and how that has kind of been at a deficit to our rest. But it's also, as wahine, we don't know how to rest. And maybe that'll be the last time I say that. We don't like to rest because there's all these other things that need to get done. And for me, I just don't trust other people to do the and that's on me. I have trust issues. I'm like, I don't know, I'm a micromanager in a sense but I also personally need to trust others to get the things done. And therefore it's this whole thing. I also have a hard time asking for help. I have a very hard time asking for help. But if I could move into that kauhale mindset, or into that umeke mindset, to call on others when I need, so that others can call on to me when they need, the whole circle we're talking about, the circle of wahine during hanau, the circle of wahine during aha kahemua, the circle of wahine that we need to, in order to just sustain us, will be easier to call on. So yes, our kūpuna had the halepe'a system on lock. They could just go for 10 days and there wasn't ever a mo'olelo that that the aupoa fell because a wahine just took 10 days. No, the aupoa kept going. There was never a mo'olelo like that, and therefore we can. We just have to trust ourselves. We have to trust in others. We have to actually tell ourselves to rest.
Yeah, no, so important. You know, one of the other things I wanted to cover before we end today, because I think it's something that's been on our minds, and in my conversations with Imai, right, who is the organizer for La Hoʻihoʻi, and a shout out now to Imai Winchester, mahalo nui for all the work and for carrying on the torch of, Dr. Kikuni Blaisdell in maintaining this, but in our conversation, right, about this, one of the things that came out was, the role of men, the role of the men in our lives, right? Whether they be our fathers, our uncles, our grandfathers, our fathers, our uncles, our cousins, our husbands, our boyfriends, our sons, right? Their role in this one remembering, right? So what their role is at this point in time in our history, in the remembering of the Haumea, in all of us, but also in that Mauliola, right? In that cycle, right? What is and how, right? So that was one of the questions, right? Is if it's significant, then how? How is it that we should expect their participation? And you all are around men who have been, alongside you, kind of actively participating in what it is that you guys have been doing, whether it was birthing or whether it was an aha for the kaika mahine, right? And makana, your kane also, like in knowing that, yep, I remember you always tell the story about your little purse, right? That he knows, right? When he sees that little purse, right? But just the active involvement of men, because right now, what we grew up under, right? Or how I grew up, maybe let's just talk about me. I grew up where when you had your Waimakale Hua, when it was that time of the month, men just kind of turned their head, right? They just turned away from it. And more so than that, right? Or on the bad side of that, there was ridicule, right? There was judgment, harsh words, right? That came out of men's mouths, right? I remember cousins not knowing any better, and my cousins love me, but just not knowing any better, would say stuff like, oh, look at that, you're getting blood all over, or clean yourself up, and that kind of term, like it was very rough around the edges, right? And I lived in a multi-generational home when I was growing up in Palolo, and again, I don't think they meant to be harsh. It just that it was framed one, right, with that word ma'i, right, that it was seen not as necessarily coming from your ma'i, right, or from that area, but that you were sick, you're somehow not well. That was a sign of being not well, right? And so that even that whole framework, from having your ma'i to having your waimakale hua, like that, even that paradigm shift is huge, right? So that we can get it away from it being considered to be a sickness and something dirty into something that's natural and life-giving, and like the entire universe relies on it. Right, like, the human world relies on this cycle that happens every month in order for it to survive, right? So what is the role of men, and how is it that they interact with this? So I think each of you, whoever can talk to us, but I want each of you to try and touch on this. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I think that your use of the word men versus boys is not by accident. I think our kane, they get such a bad rap for many things, but partially it's like the traumas that have been privy to kane through generations or through specific life experiences, there are so many traumas that they have experienced that not only do we have to teach them the ways of wahine, but we have to also unteach. Whereas with boys, with keiki kane, our role as wahine is to lead by example, and to lead with a loving heart, with open conversations, so that there's no healing that we have to do in the future. And Kihapai can talk about this a little later, but something that I noticed in her ohana is that by her example and the example of her hiapo, of her firstborn child, who was a girl, their keiki kane grew up with so much understanding because of the example that was led through experience. So with older kane, there are many healing points that need to happen so that the conversation of waimakalehua and of honoring that time as a sacred time, there's a lot of healing. But for boys specifically, it's just lead by example. And when we can, because there are generational boundaries, make corrections. If you feel that someone said something that was mean or hurtful, correct them. Because you never know, you never know if that was a misspeaking because they just don't know, or if it's because they were actually being malicious. Most times they just didn't know. So use every opportunity as a learning opportunity.
Okay, I guess I'll come in. Mahalo, Makana. For us, the kane did have an important role. They do. And I'm gonna just point to that particular time, especially between when the kaika mahine had their first until the second one. That was when that time where we did this practice for the aha and things like that, preparing for the aha. And so we have one keiki kane and one keiki kane. So after his father, he is the kane of the ohana. And in that time period, he did have an important role. He was to malama his sisters, and to help, whether it was to prepare the mea'ai for them. He took on kuleana within that time, marking that, that first vaimakalehua. He had the role, like the father too, but for him especially, our keiki go to school now. They physically go to school. So at that time, he was the kane at school, so he had to malama his sister, and he did play an important role. And I believe, I can see him as a kane now, that he holds that responsibility with him. I think, people who know him, you see, and he's proud of it. He's proud of it. But even just preparing the mea'ai, all of those things, all that practicing, conducting aha. Of course, that particular aha was for me to do, but normally in our ohana, that's where the kane come in. Yeah, the kane are the ones who are doing the aha, preparing the mea'ai for the aha. And of course, in that particular time, they have their kuleana kakao for our ohana, right? So they have a lot of kuleana. And I think even seeing the difference, I mean, for me, my father, my brother, I have one brother, that wasn't really a thing, at that time. It was just kind of like, oh, you're on your own. But, seeing that the kane took part in that, and it was a thing, like, oh my gosh, she got her first, that kahimua, it was a thing in our ohana, like, it was like in the hale, it was, oh my gosh. And it's also a thing where, we have our moments, every month, not necessarily every month, but there are times, it's like, oh, harvai makalehua. It's kind of like, oh, okay. Like, you notice when, we say we get emotional as wahine, but then it's like, oh, okay, that's why. But, it's kind of like, oh, it's okay. It's nothing big, you kind of like, yuhui kala, right? And I think, yeah, you brought up about, yeah, sometimes things aren't said intentionally, you know, things come out, but it's remembering that, you know, we mihi and, you know, we hui kala, and it's okay, you know, things evolve. You know, I know this isn't specifically to what we're talking about right now, but, you know, just seeing even within the aha from the two kaikamahine, there was a evolution in that. And I can see that even after those two, now, you know, none of them have keiki, but they're already talking, okay, when we have our kaikamahine and they go through this is what we're going to do now. You know, and you know, it's always going to evolve, and it's being open to that evolution, because we are constantly learning. And it's okay, you know, it doesn't have to be set in stone, like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. You know, something else comes up and we learn something, and okay, what we can incorporate that into this, whatever aha or whatever it is that you have. And even, you know, Makana talking about how she malamas her, you know, every month. We didn't necessarily do that with our kaikamahine, I'm gonna be honest. And especially, you know, my kaikamahine tried different things, and maybe not necessarily because of sports, but it didn't work. You know what I mean? But I just want to share that it's just the intention that, so what we raised them was always with anything that you have, like how we say with our lawoho, whatever, you know, sometimes things slip away by accident, but you pull it. Yeah, we always pull it. So it's, you know, we know that there's blood on it, but, you know, you pull it just to maintain your mana, right, within you, that it's connected to you, it's yours, and you pull it to let it go. So that's just something that because of course in certain times we can't necessarily malama it. It's harder. I shouldn't say we can't, but it is harder too. So sometimes we do things to accommodate it, but I think with the intention of pule, you know, it's okay for me anyway, personally. But kalamai, I kind of went off on a
No, mahalo for that. Cami, what is your thoughts about that and the role of men? And because you have, you know, your son too, you know, growing up with the girls, you know, and men around you, and already talked about how Laiana was, you know, at the birth, but
I think it's really interesting. Like, I noticed that my kane, and I know one of my cousins, they're the kiloers of the, like, of my va. Like, you know, my Laiana had, you know, he's very papahulilani. That's just him. He's Laiana, so he's totally like, you know, papahulilani. But there's some point where he was like, oh yeah, because you know, almost kane moons, yeah, so almost your time. I was like, oh, okay, like I do my own tracking, but not realizing that, like, you know, kanes do that too. Kanes that are, you know, in sync, and he knows what's going on. So I was like, oh,
well,
okay.
Laiana gets bonus points for that one. Yeah, that's not a crime. Like, yeah, oh yeah, your moons is coming up, babe. You know,
Yeah.
like that's yeah, he got to do workshop.
Yeah. So I was even kind of shocked, like, oh, okay. And then I got kind of in, like, so for like a couple of years or so, I was like, oh, so what when you think ko uva, and then he would like tell me like, oh, not this week but next week. So, you know, that's something that's all from learning, because I think like you know, we are totally that generation, like Makana was talking about, that like, you know, for Kane, he grew up in a household of 3 men and only his mom, you know, so that's a totally different, he didn't have that. I don't know if she really talked about that. It happened, I knew they were aware of it, but I don't know if that was really talked about, because they didn't have to deal with it for a new generation, you know. And our first kiki, our hiapo, was a kaikomahine, so I, you know, I had to prep him on a lot of things. And like, sorry, just, you know, maybe tangent, but also like how to wipe, right? He grew up in a household of 3 boys. Like, I had to teach my husband, oh, girls, you know, you gotta go front to back, because it's a real, you know, you don't wanna mess that up, right? So it's just a lot of unlearning and then relearning, and I think that's totally fine. And I've noticed just for me and my kane, as we've progressed through, you know, we've had 4 births together, all in our different homes. but his role has elevated, but it's awareness and communication on both sides. You know, the first one, like, I didn't even know what I was doing, much less he knew how to have a role in my birth, right? We had a midwife, we had a kako'o midwife, and we had my mom, and he was just kind of there irritating me, you know, like, not on purpose, not because he was trying to, but just because, like, I don't know how to tell him what I need, and he doesn't know how to help me. So, like, I was just like, go brush your teeth, like, you're too stink, like, I can't, you know, just like, yeah. So, but we've evolved, and so, like, to the part for my third birth, he really was, like, you know, helping move my hips, like, just kind of you know, there. And then for whatever reason, like, you know, I'm totally in the birth world, but I never really thought about, like, asking him if he wanted to catch the baby. And it wasn't until the fourth baby that he was totally, like, one of our midwife friends was staying with us from Kona, and she's like, well, why doesn't Laiana catch the baby, you know? And then he was totally like, oh yeah, I want to do that, I want to catch the baby. And I was like, yeah, like, and I felt so silly, like, oh wait, how come I never asked him earlier if he wanted that, you know? So we talked about what that looked like. And you know, the baby, like, my birth was late, it was like 10 days late, and then before you know it, the process was super quick. So it was like not a lot of verbal communication, but he was able to, with our last keiki, he was able to you know, baby slipped out, and he was able to catch him, and then, but was being coached by the midwife to undo the umbilical cord. And so yeah, so I think, like, it's all those moments, like, we had to grow together as a couple, grow as an ohana, for him to be at a place where, like, he knows what to do, he knows what I need, like, you know, like, I cannot eat when I'm in labor, like, my certain things that I need as this particular wahine. So I think that yeah, just, you know, in the beginning, it's not going to be perfect, but as we grew as a couple, it got better. And then him as a daddy with our kaikomahine, I think, you know, I had to coach a little bit, because it's not natural, right? It's not something that he learned, like we discussed, but and now he's a great daddy, you know, and supports her in all her different things. We didn't do ceremony like Kihapai them did, and it was definitely my kuleana, and I think I didn't, you know, we talked about it, and I didn't I didn't follow through. And I think that was just kind of my hopo, you know, and my nervousness, and, like, but we did things where we honored with some of her hoas that she grew up with, our little ko'olau and mamona crew. Oh, Mehano came, so we had a weekend where it was like a mahina weekend, and we had some girls that had started, some that didn't, but just kind of like that ho'omaha that Makana talked about, where we discussed it. What does it mean for you, but what does it mean for you as a kanaka, and what does it mean spiritually? Yeah, and I thought it was really important for Mehana to be there. Makana was also there that weekend, and although we didn't do our own ohana ceremony, having that kind of ho'omaha weekend, halepe'a in and of itself, with her hoas that, you know, they've known each other from since we were all hapai, that it was really important to have that. And they refer to that sometimes, like, oh yeah, we talked about this with Anake Makana or Anake Mehana. You know, they'll touch upon little moments that they've absorbed that I know that it doesn't all hit them at once, but throughout the years they'll be able to go back to that weekend and talk about it, and they do. So yeah, so mahalo.
Mahalo for that. You know, mahalo for that. I think you guys gave good insight to the men out there, right? Or wahine out there who have men in their life, you know, knowing that, you know, there's definitely a role, right? This is something definitely that men, you know, the men in your ohana, you know, they don't have to ignore it anymore. In fact, they can become really active players in the well-being of everyone. Yeah, and kind of come full circle, so that the well-being of their daughters, you know, their wahine, you know, their mothers, their sisters, and so forth, become part of their kuleana, their frame of reference. And from the very kind of biological, you know, things shifting with bodies and cycles during the month, and then over the years, it is something that Hawaiian men right? Kanaka, Kane should be looking for when in their next leveling up, in their next, growth of them reclaiming their ea. I would challenge all of our Hawaii out there, our men, to reclaim that part of the ea, right? The ea of our ohana that kind of needs their presence in these forms that they either typically pulled themselves out of and or was shut out of because of the way our society viewed women, and especially young women. Cami, you was gonna say something.
Yeah, Kalomai, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I think another thing that we kind of talked about, but I think is important is, the boys too, like how I've prepared my boys, like, we touched a little bit upon Oimakalehua kind things and how, the process, but I think it's been really important to me to label female parts by, names that we use, not like, we say kohe, like we use the words and then they know that that's where they came from, so that's what they honor. When I need to command respect from them, sometimes I talk about, like, you came from my kohe, this is what I did for you, so this is why you respect me as a makuahine, and I think just talking about those life cycles where this is why they need to honor wahine, not just because we just command respect because we need to be, but because of what we've been through physically and spiritually to birth them and bring them here. And then and they should always honor women for the rest of their lives because of not only me because I'm your mom, but like how we're talking about, like, your punas, your tutus, and all the women around, and tita, and all the women around us. So I think that teaching the boys that from young is very important. Just, proper labeling and proper body functions and cycles and all that good stuff. Yeah.
But that's good too, because I think as we learn terminology, as we embrace terminology that is more akin to our Mauliola, right? That our that our Lahui has understood for 1,000 years, right? That related to our cycles, our well-being, and so forth. It is also imperative that not only the women know the women terminology, right? That the men have to know the women terminology too, right? I don't think this is the part of any secret handshake language that we want to keep to ourselves, right? We want our men to understand the verbiage and then our young men, what's good is that, like, when you tell them this is kohe, this is the part of the body that's the kohe, and then they go to kohe malama lama, right? And then the world becomes actually less confusing, right? When we start using those terminologies across the board, right? And it's imperative for us as wahine to understand the terminology of men, right? And their cycles, right? So that would be another one. That's somebody else's kuleana to do that webinar, though. That's not mine, right? So one of the men from Ahakane, probably, I don't know, Kavika Tengan, you go do that talk, or Imai. Yeah, but it is important for us to all learn those languages, use those languages, because then that informs our practice. When we know how to call it out, then we know how to do it, right? Or if we're doing it, and then we can learn the terminology so we can perpetuate it, right? It follows each other. So thank you for bringing that part up. Na Haumea, mahalo nui. I think we've come to that time in our program where we've, come about to the hour. And, but just before we end, I wanted to give another shout out to Imai Winchester and his whole crew of people who are putting on, month-long events that takes a whole year of planning. And I so look forward to all the exciting stuff's coming in the future for this national celebration, La Hoʻihoʻi, because he's always talking about, okay, let's do this part next year, let's do that next year. So mahalo nui Imai for all that energy you're putting into this, and for actually being a spark to inspire this panel and all the other great education moments that have happened this week. And I'd like to thank each of you, and I'm going to let all of you actually close out with a final thought here. But mahalo to you, Cami, for being that young wahine. I remember you coming, like, geez, it might have been years ago, you know, I just going, you know, Anake. First, I got to get over people calling me Anake, but, you know, I'll get over that. But, it, you know, Anake, tell me more about Hina, right? Tell me more about Haumea, and mahalo for that energy, right? That fire that is constantly wanting to elevate what it is that we understand and what we know. And I'm sorry, because I don't think I gave you any answers, right? You kept asking, and I was just like, okay, yeah, let's talk about that one day. And you know, that part has not happened yet, but one day, yeah. But you've done it. You know, you took it upon yourself to not only learn it, but to practice and be brave, right? Makana, thank you too. I mean, again, you're probably dealing with one of those topics that is so hard for men and women to make that paradigm shift, right? Because of all the baggage that we carry, what you talk about is sometimes really hard for us to hear, but you keep talking about it, and you keep evolving your own personal understanding of it, so that when we are makau, we can come along, right? We can come along with you. So thank you again for something as a simple process that happens every month, right? There's so much wrapped around it, you know, and we don't have people who are actively talking about it like you are. So thank you for being the champion of our, you know, of our Haumea, all right? And really kind of being so matter of fact about it, right? Just like so comfortable in it, right? That it starts to, even me, even though it shakes me sometimes, some of the stuff you say, because it shakes my own practice and makes me reflect on myself. You say it with such comfort that it allows me to step into that space with comfort, right? So thank you so much for that. And Kihapai, again, you will always underplay your role in what, you know, has become the goal of many makuahine out there, and that is to usher in not only your kaikamahine, but even your keikikane, right, into these roles that we know can help shape healthy families, right, that are grounded in these basic beliefs, right, these basic structures within our family, and then practice within our family. So you are and will forever be, right, one of those leaders, or one of those people who are on the cusp, right, at the edge of what it is to elevate Hawaiian practice, cultural practice, right? And again, do not waste your time on this show denying it with me anymore. Yeah, just talk about something else. Get over the fact that I'm saying this. But I really thank you for that, right? Again, each of you have stepped into brave spaces. Our community can be the worst. Our community can be the worst critics at trying to stop something that they don't understand, right? That's a part of our healing, right? So I don't blame our people for that. That's a part of our collective healing from what we have experienced in our recent past. And recent past meaning the 300, you know, just, you know, a short 300 years ago until now, right? So our people are in a place of healing, and that reaction can sometimes look very virile against ourselves, right? So I thank you for stepping into those brave spaces and not just being huna about it, right? Not just hiding it, but also bringing enough of it forward to give the rest of us enough to build our own confidence, build our own practice, and start together as a lahui. This is my idea of ho'ulu lahui, right? This picture right here. In fact, I have to take a picture of this, but this picture right here, this snapshot is that ho'ulu lahui, right? Is being able to step into those brave spaces and create the abundance, right? Of whether that's ike, of practice, right? Of trial and error, right? Of trying something, of evolution, right? Starting to practice one way, and then as your keiki grow, right? Evolving that practice into another space. Like that is ho'ulu lahui to me, right? All those models, that's kulia ikanu'u, right? But it is also sometimes a very lonely space, and sometimes a space that, you know, can be hurtful depending on the people, you know, who are around you. But know that I love and think that all three of you guys are amazing. So that was my final thoughts, but final thoughts from each of you. And let's go back in the order that we started in. Yeah, so Cami, any final thoughts?
No, mahalo nui ya oko a paupakahi, especially you, Mehana. Mahalo for being that Haumea, from our halau, you know, being that Haumea inspiration. And one of the phrases that I learned over the years that I just love, I mean, there's so many awesome phrases for Haumea, but the Haumea hanau vava, right? Where she's always coming back, she's always birthing more action and always bringing back all her intelligence. And I think this is just one of those va where we get to become the Haumea who has tapped into that ancestral knowledge that we carry within us, and then help inspire the next generation, and then just see what they're able to tap into from just the little seeds that we help to plant. So mahalo nui ya oko.
Mahalo. Makana?
Ai, mahalo ya kako, mahalo ke akokoa, mahalo for all the kūpuna that have sat with us for this past hour. I think departing thoughts, if at any point any of us or of our ohana, if we are operating at that dangerous deficit, do as much as possible to change that deficit into something of growth. If it's an opportunity to learn and to teach, or if it's an opportunity for healing, if we could all just move towards away from deficit into growth in our Mauli ola, in our olalo, in our ceremonies, then we will all be that much healthier in the collective. So mahalo.
Mahalo, Makana. Kihapai.
Oia, mahalo ia o ko, me ka poe e ho'olohe ana I ke ia, noho ana I ka ho'olohe ana. Mahalo ia o ko. Mahalo for, yes, including me into this conversation. You know, just, I want to encourage every you know, wahine, makuahine, or kaika mahine, you know, just for us to look back at, you know, our traditions and the things that were done before us, and, you know, how we can incorporate them. And yes, it is going to be hard. You know, it's heavy, you know, and sometimes doing it is very scary. I think even, you know, like Cami had shared, you know, your hopo, and it's okay. And, you know, whether you do it, you don't, I guess I just want to encourage, just do it. You're not going to know unless you try it. And then, you know, then like things can evolve, and that's fine, you know, and it'll change. And sometimes you figure out, okay, maybe, you know, maybe I'm not comfortable with this, and it's okay, but we're not going to know unless we try it. You know, so definitely, if I would say I want to leave this with encouraging, you know, all of us Haumea, all of us wahine, be who we are, you know, and sometimes we're still looking to find out who we are, and that's fine too. You know, it is a cycle, it's an evolution, and we're just going to continue. So mahalo.
Well, mahalo nui, everyone. And like our guest had said, thank you all of you who are out there watching this program right now. Again, please check out La Hoʻihoʻi Honolulu's Facebook page for more information and more talks that were put on in celebration of La Hoʻihoʻi 2021. And also, I do believe there'll be in-person, I think they're gonna raise the flag at Thomas Square on July 31st. So check out lahoʻihoʻiea.org for more information on the calendar of events and the timing of things happening. And we hope to see you out there. And like all of these guests have said, go and reclaim your ea. Right, and help us, and let's help each other do that as a lahui. Ahui ho kako malamo pono.